Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of A Mic on the Podium with me, Michael Seal. Before we start, I want to draw your attention to the two ways you can support the podcast financially. If you'd like to make a one-off donation, I've set up a Just Giving page where you can help the show continue on into the future by donating as much or as little as you like. Alternatively, there are 6 different levels of subscription starting from just £5 a month over at patreon.com/A Mic on the Podium. There you will find 2 new podcast series, a monthly bulletin, group and personal Zoom meetings, articles, mini episodes attached to this series, and even the chance to have some conducting lessons from myself. The details are in the show notes below, and I'd greatly appreciate any help you can manage. Today, I conduct a conversation with a Russian conductor who studied at the Sibelius Academy in Helsinki before going on to have jobs with 3 different Finnish orchestras. He's also principal conductor with an orchestra in Spain and has a very high-profile career as a guest conductor with some of the world's top orchestras. It's a real pleasure to welcome Dima Slobodeniouk. Dima, lovely to chat to you today. How are you?
Hi, Michael. Very well, very well. Just arrived in Lahti, where I had my first rehearsal with my Lahti Symphony. So, yeah, after 2 weeks of quarantine.
2 weeks of quarantine. Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. And how was your first rehearsal? I've just rehearsed the CBSO for 2 days ahead of their centenary concert with Simon Rattle, and probably the first time they'd ever sat 2 meters apart to rehearse. How was it in Lahti?
Yeah, also 2 meters apart. Actually, I'm not sure whether it is 1.5 or 2, but yeah, I mean, I would say sufficient distance.
And they found it easy to adjust?
Yeah, I would say surprisingly quickly. We did find a way, to communicate. Actually, just to mention that we are not in our hall, Sibelius Hall at the moment, because it's under, reconstruction. So we are kind of forced to rehearse in a smaller hall, and it's much easier to hear each other there. So this distance on the stage is not really, producing any problems at the moment.
We did think in the CBSO that actually it might be good going forwards when we all get back to sitting in the normal distance apart, that to be able to listen harder, it might be a very good training for going back to normal.
Oh, yes. Many times when, an issue comes in the orchestra rehearsal and people say that, well, I can't hear that. Actually, the reality is usually that, you know what I'm going to say, right?
Yeah, so, exactly. Yeah. It's not a case that you can't hear it. You weren't listening hard enough. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's, you just have to find another way of listening.
Exactly.
Or, playing less, listening more, and really forced to do something in order to, survive, then you survive.
Dima, with everybody, I go back right to the beginning of your life. And how did music first come into your life? You were born in Russia. I'm right there, aren't I?
Yeah, I was born in Moscow. How did music come into my life? Actually, I have no idea. I don't remember. I think my parents would be the right people to ask that. But as long as I remember myself, there has always been music, and in particular classical music. So because all my relatives, including my parents, grandparents, and their siblings, they were all musicians. So there was no other way. And I mean, in good and in bad, it's I'm really grateful for the this surrounding and all the circumstances which I just I was just born into it and grew having it as for granted. For many people it is not, but obviously together with all the benefits, you also get some negative sides on that, because you you only get a lot of influence from one side and not enough of influence from from the other fields. But I guess I compensated that later in my life.
And you were a violinist, yes? But did you also learn piano and sing and do all the other stuff?
All the other stuff I don't know, but I did play piano. Well, actually, I I had to play piano because
Yeah.
it was compulsory, which was part of the problem. Because if you have to do something, you usually are not as motivated as if you really want to do something. And obviously that got compensated as well, because I got much more interested in piano playing later on, when I really didn't have to do that. But as long as I was in school, music school, it was compulsory for all string players and obviously wind players to play piano. So yeah, violin was my main instrument from the beginning. I started playing in the age of 5 and played until 2001.
Yeah, yeah.
When I got my degree from Sibelius Academy.
Which means that you grew up for a lot of your childhood through Soviet Russia, and previous conductors I've spoken to who grew up under some sort of Soviet regime, Cristian Macellera in Romania, Andris Nelsons in Latvia, said that music school also included choirs and formal training in harmony. Was that true?
Oh yeah, very much true. By the way, talking about Wikipedia, I was actually 16 when I moved to Finland.
Well, so there we go. Wikipedia is wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, well, yes, I actually studied at Central Music School in Moscow.
Yeah.
It was considered as, well, I don't know, hard to say, but at that time they always talked about it as the best and the most prestigious. They expected you to be able to, hear and identify different intervals, chords, just notes on piano. Obviously, they did not, expect you to have a perfect pitch.
Right.
But what happened is that because my mother really worked with me a lot before the entrance examinations, so we spent probably a couple of summers and everything in between. She spent training my ear, and the outcome, I don't know whether it is due to that or thanks to is perfect pitch a genetic thing? That's a big question.
Yeah.
But I ended up having a perfect pitch, so I could hear all the notes separately or together, in any order, and that was not difficult for me. But the requirements were pretty tough, for a 7-year-old.
Pretty rigorous training. So now we know that Wikipedia is wrong, and you left to go to Helsinki at 16. You mentioned earlier the Sibelius Academy, and I'm assuming it is while you were there studying the violin that you entered into thinking about conducting. And the Sibelius Academy, there are 3 names linked to you as teachers, 2 of which have come up a couple of times or many times in the case of Jorma Panela on previous podcasts, but also Leif Segerstam, talking about going into a forest and screaming. But the other name that I see on there, which is a name I know, but maybe my listeners don't, is somebody called Atso Almila. How did the classes work between the 3 teachers and their approaches? What was it like studying with those 3 big names?
Oh, I think it was a fantastic system at that time. It did change after I left, but after I finished the school. But we had a very balanced way of sharing the lessons. Obviously, they would come in and teach in turns, and Jorma is, of course, and he was the one who started the dynasty of Finnish kind of conducting school. So he was not a professor anymore at that time. In fact, between him and Leif, who was occupying the post of professor at that time, there was Erik Klass also.
Okay.
So Leif was the main teacher. He started, I think, 1 year before I entered the school, the conducting class, and I graduated with him being my main teacher. But Jorma taught us regularly, very systematically, and Atso too. So we would have, let's say, 60-70% of our lessons with Leif, and the rest with Jorma and Atso.
And what the Sibelius Academy has, and I'm assuming you had then, which very few places have, is an orchestra that you can conduct regularly every week, which gives you podium time and away from the dreaded 2 piano classes. Were the teachers always there during those sessions, and did they focus on your musicianship, or was there a lot of stick technique and rehearsal technique?
Yeah, that's an important and very interesting question. Well, first of all, the way it was kind of constructed, on Thursday we would meet just between us, so just us students, and we would play for each other. So we would all bring our instruments and form a small orchestra. And for example, Jorma would sit at the piano and play all the missing stuff.
Yeah.
And we would conduct in turns. So that was Thursday. But then Friday and Saturday, we would have altogether 3-hour rehearsals, which were divided by the amount of people who were present at that time. And that was very, we really did calculate. So 11 minutes is 11 minutes, and that's not 12 minutes. And so everybody got an even amount and fair amount of time. And yes, there was always a teacher, was it Leif or Jorma or Atso, they were always there and concentrating on different things. I would say Leif did concentrate on technical stuff. Well, for me, it was a bit different with everybody, but for me, it was, let's say, first year or first half a year, he would not let me kind of advance before I fixed my right hand. So that he called it calligraphy in the right hand, so that the kind of the beauty was there. So it was not improvised. Where is 1 and where is 2 and where is 3, and so he was very particular with that. I still remember actually, because they, sometimes we had sessions dedicated to certain pieces so that everybody did more or less the same repertoire. And then sometimes we could choose ourselves what we needed to do. Maybe some people who already had some gigs, they wanted to bring in a piece or a couple of pieces to try it out. But those times when we did, concentrate on the same piece, and in my case, the first lesson ever in the conducting class was Mahler 9, first movement.
Oh wow, that's tough.
And that's quite something to start with. And I remember I conducted first until the first climax. Let's say first 2-3 minutes. Then Leif stopped and said, "Well, technically," and then followed an analysis of the trajectory of my right hand. So that put me pretty much on the right floor of where we are. So like, okay, you are starting with Mahler 9, fine, but you need to learn to conduct in 4 first.
Yeah, it would be a good start, wouldn't it?
yeah, exactly. He didn't say it exactly like that, but I got the point.
Yes.
So
yeah, it's my other question, mainly through studying with Jorma for very intensive 2 weeks. Was everything videoed in your classes, and did you then go back over the videos with Leif and with Atso, or even with Jorma, who was coming in at the time? Was video used? Because I know in some schools it is, and in others it isn't.
Always. Always video. And Jorma was the prophet of that kind of that idea. I think it's fantastic. It's extremely useful. I would say it is 50% of the outcome is because you get to see yourself. And because if if a person is more or less okay psychologically, and not a narcissist who loves to see him or herself, but usually people have great difficulties watching themselves conduct.
That's
so
true.
If you can overcome that negative aspect and really look at yourself and analyze what is it exactly that you are doing, what you shouldn't be doing, and I would say, having them, let's say, Leif, sit there and show you exactly, look, you did this and then happened this. So you always you learned to understand that what you are doing really, really matters. And as you said, not many schools have orchestra. So there you really learn the interaction. You don't learn to conduct, you learn to interact with people. And
right.
And video is extremely important, because otherwise you have no idea really.
Well, the analogy I was going to use, that's just popped into my head while you were talking about that, is, the great thing about video sessions as a conductor is that you can look back at what you were doing in the heat of battle whilst you're conducting. When you're conducting, you really shouldn't be thinking about the technicalities of things. It's a lot like a golfer or a batsman at cricket, in the fact that when you go and play a round of golf, or you bat an innings for your cricket team, you shouldn't be thinking about the technicalities. You should just be doing it. It's afterwards then you go to your coach and talk it through. And I think that's the same thing with the video and conducting, is that when you're actually conducting, you should be interacting with the people and dealing with the musical problems. But you shouldn't be thinking, actually my thumb should be holding the baton this way and my left hand should be in this shape. Do you agree? I think that's how it helps.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. On one plate, it's this, and on another plate, it's the process of learning. Sometimes, conductors usually are not supposed to lose their face in front of the orchestra. And even young conductors who come into the class, they already know that. And sometimes for you to really learn, you need to momentarily lose your face in front of the orchestra in the class. So sometimes you really have to go and try something, even something mechanical or something on the expression side, which actually Leif did talk about. Things which are not very obvious, right? So you had to really dive into yourself on the spot and kind of be vulnerable and kind of not being that a secure conductor who knows everything.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not true.
Yeah, it's now, especially at that age, it's not true, and you have to make mistakes. So how long were you in the conducting class, and when you finished the conducting class, did you immediately go out into the big wide world and start guesting, or did you do competitions and other master classes around the world? What was your journey out of the Sibelius Academy and into the big wide world of conducting?
It was quite gradual, actually, very gradual. I started 98 and finished 2001. So I graduated from violin and conducting in the same year. And already, from 99, I started having gigs in Finland. And Finland is actually a very nice field for a young conductor to develop, because here, people kind of know each other, and orchestras do seem to give opportunities to young conductors.
Well, you've just circumvented my question in about 3 questions time, but let's talk about it now, in the fact that the Finns do tend to support very young talent in their country and nurture it and give them jobs when they're young. I think of Sakari Oramo and Susanna Malki getting jobs when they're young, and currently people like Dalia Statevska and Klaus Mekele, they're encouraged Do you think that's a particularly Finnish trait? And if so, why are they like that?
I think it's not a particular Finnish thing, but perhaps Finland was one of the first countries to start that. And I think Jorma had quite a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
Because he would arrange all these courses, I mean, master classes involving these orchestras. So sometimes even someone studying at that Sibelius Academy, he or she would participate in his masterclass with one of the orchestras, and so people get to know them, and so I would say it seemed like a very natural process, but obviously it didn't work for everybody.
No.
I think I arrived in Finland pretty much in the last moment for someone to be able to absorb this new culture. I was 16, not too young, not too old. Just let's say 5-6 years later, it would have been much more difficult for me.
Yes, yeah.
But I did get along with Finns pretty well, and I still do. And I think maybe part of me really needed that, to fill in something I've been missing before. So I was very hungry to learn new culture and new ways of doing, and I actually grew into it. It's not like a parallel reality. It actually is myself.
Yeah.
So it went well for me, and I just went from orchestra to orchestra little by little. So 10 years, about 9 years, let's say, if I started having gigs in 99, by 2008, I was conducting quite a lot, so I could make my living in Finland without going abroad.
Yeah.
And from 2008, then things started happening abroad.
Which is possibly where I played for you. And I remember you coming to Birmingham.
Yes.
And you conducted Nielsen's Fourth Symphony, and we did we went up to Manchester as well. Your first couple of jobs, as you said, would be in Finland, principal guest of the Kumi Sinfonietta.
It's Kumi.
Kumi. I can do some Finnish pronunciations, but that one stumped me.
And then, very well.
And then chief conductor of Ulo. Is that how you pronounce that? From 05 to 08. And now you're in Lahti as the boss, and have been since 2016.
Yeah.
But then, of course, guesting. And guesting, I went onto your agent's website, and the list of places you've been is amazing. And I wanted to ask you a specific question that I don't think I've asked anybody else, actually, in the fact that, from, as you said, from about 2008 onwards, you're now fully immersed in a conducting world. But, when you come to conduct something like the Berlin Philharmonic or the Leipzig Gewandhaus or the Concertgebouw for the first time, what's it like? What thought processes do you have? Obviously, you're excited, but then maybe nerves come into it, and programming and all of that. How do you approach a debut with a big orchestra like that?
Beforehand, it's enormous joy.
Yes.
That you are giving the opportunity to make music on highest possible level, and. On the spot, it's always finding the keys to these doors.
Yes.
It's as with any orchestra, regardless of the level, and especially with the orchestras you mentioned, you have to have the flexibility, and that is perhaps the thing which makes me. Talking about nerves, that makes me. That makes me nervous and sometimes insecure. Am I on the spot? Do I have the flexibility to keep myself open and react to what's going on? And I think just making music with them, it's a great joy.
Yeah.
But I find it very similar to the joy of music making anywhere.
Yes.
So somehow these huge names which make you, as well, relatively young conductor, rather nervous, and the expectations are huge. And still, the trick in my case, I don't know about the others, but in my case, is to keep myself open and just to be myself, and not to over try. That's a challenge for me. When I did achieve that, then that makes you extremely happy.
Yes, you're absolutely. I mean, I completely agree with you about being yourself wherever you are. It doesn't matter whether it's the Berlin Phil or any other orchestra. You've got to be yourself, because first of all, the musicians will see straight through you if you're not. And when if you're open to what the musicians give back to you, and ideas and phrasings, and be immersed in the process, it really helps. The other comment I was going to make was that Andres Nelsons once said to me, if you go to the Berlin Phil and you don't have lots and lots of ideas to give them, things don't go well. Do you agree with that comment, or about the fact that you need lots of ideas and obviously be fully prepared?
This is something I've been many times afraid of, that actually, as you started, conducting the orchestras, their level is getting higher and higher. And then always when you step up to a new level, you think, oh damn, I don't have anything to say to them. But I never had that problem.
No.
And I was surprised every time this happened. I was surprised. But I can very well and I can, I absolutely agree with Andres, because these groups of musicians, they are very hungry, and they are very good musicians themselves, separately and together. Because sometimes you have orchestras where you have great musicians separately, but being that team which is used to doing things, if you don't feed them with your ideas, they will do things their way.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
And they will do them very well, and you will feel very outsider. And that's what you don't want to be happening. So you need to grasp, kind of get the, hold the bull by the horns.
Yeah, exactly.
That is much more difficult than perhaps anything in that situation.
So currently you hold two jobs, one in Lahti in Finland, and the other one is the Orchestra Sinfónica de Galicia in A Coruña in Spain, which you've been their principal conductor since 2013. What are the differences like working with an orchestra full of Finnish musicians and the orchestra in Spain? Are there any differences? The only thing I would say is that, having looked at the orchestra in Galicia, they're quite a young orchestra in age. They're only founded in 1992, weren't they? Has that made any difference? What's it like having the two jobs in Spain and Finland?
It's a very exciting time. Not easy, because they are very far apart. Actually, living in Europe, you don't find orchestras, further from each other than this. At least not very much. So traveling wise, it's been quite tough. But working with them, they are very different. As you said, Galician orchestra is just about 27, 28 years old, and their musicians are obviously very, as a group, by age they're very close, but the amount of nationalities in that orchestra is from 15 to 20, something like this. So, so it's a very diverse group. In Lahti, it's a little bit smaller orchestra, very different hall, which is very, very important. Well, this hall is pretty amazing. This Sibelius Hall here in Lahti, perhaps one of the best halls I've ever been to, and the way of working is more of that which I kind of grew into while starting my career.
Yes.
So so I've started going to Lahti, as early as actually my symphonic diploma concert was in Lahti in 2001.
Oh wow! Yeah.
So the first time I came here, that was my diploma.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
they've known you a while.
Yes, and since then I've been here every year or every second year. So yeah, it's a long relationship.
Going back to guesting, do you enjoy? I've called them first dates in the past. Getting to know an orchestra for the first time. What are the challenges that you find, separate from what we were talking about with the Berlin Phil, but just generally, what challenges do you find when you travel to a new place? You stand in front of an orchestra for the first time, and you put that downbeat down, and you have no idea what's going to come back. Tell us what that's like and how you process that.
In the beginning, it's the case every week because almost every orchestra is a new
It's new,
orchestra.
yeah.
But then you get used to that. I don't kind of I'm not so nervous about that. I'm not so worried about the first downbeat, and I try to keep myself doing the same thing regardless of the orchestra. Obviously, especially in case that you are doing the same piece on consecutive weeks with two different orchestras.
Yeah.
The same keys, they just don't work. You've achieved something in one place and then you're moving on, and then you seem, okay, well, we have to start from scratch. It's not going to be the same. So you find a path to that final result, which you have in your mind, and which will certainly be different from the previous week, and you just have to find a new path. So I'm more curious about really hearing what happens after the first downbeat than I'm afraid of that.
Yeah. And it becomes a puzzle, doesn't it? To use your analogy of doing the same piece one week and then doing the same piece the next week with a new orchestra. I often say to conducting students I've had, the gesture you used in week one is guaranteed not to work in week two with a different set of musicians.
Absolutely.
You have to approach it differently and start again and react to what comes at you. It's no good learning a set of dance moves to go along with a symphony. You've got to get in there and work out what's coming back at you and how the interaction's going on.
Absolutely. No dance moves at all. Whenever I give lessons, or they ask me to teach. Actually, we have little masterclass going in Galicia, and whenever I see that my new younger colleagues, they start looking like Carlos Kleiber or Claudia Abbado,
yeah.
I'm always asking them the same questions. By any chance, you have not watched a little bit too much of Carlos Kleiber and trying to imitate him? Are you not?
Yeah. I mean, the problem is that every conductor probably watches the very few Carlos Kleiber videos that there are, and and sometimes a little bit too obsessively, and then you get to conduct Brahms 2 or Beethoven 7 or Beethoven 4 or Brahms 4, and you think, don't do a Kleiber move there. It becomes like that. And you're so right. I've seen students who conducting those pieces or Kleiber pieces, and you think, yeah, you've watched that video far too often.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And that's what's really so fascinating about this profession, is that what he gets with the same moves, you will not.
No.
And that's the best about it. Otherwise, it would be really boring.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah, you could just put a clone up there and it would work every time. But no, you've got to get it. You've got to get involved with what comes back at you and deal with the situation in the room.
And one thing I need to mention, just a quick comment about this, because actually, from my experience, from my observation, you will get the orchestra. The orchestra will play well for you if they want to. And the job is to get them to want to play well for you.
Yes.
That's the thing. You can't force them. Well, you can, but in 21st century, not anymore. But that's not the same. You can't force them to make great music with you. But they have to want to do that. And for that, you need to win, authority over them.
Yeah, and also, as a previous conductor has said on the podcast, yes, you need to win the authority, but also it's very easy to lose them very quickly as well by saying and doing the wrong things. I think an orchestra, having sat in one for 22 years, on a Monday morning with a brand new guest conductor, they want it to work. Nobody sits there thinking, go on, fail. Everybody wants it to work. Everybody wants a great week of music making. But it's quite easy to lose them within 5 minutes with the wrong sentence or the wrong atmosphere or attitude. So yes, it's partly winning. It's also partly not losing, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, exactly that. Yeah.
The next question I've asked everybody, and it's mainly for the conducting geeks, but I think a lot of people now are finding this quite interesting. When you come to learn a new score, do you have a system for learning it? Do you use a piano or the violin, or do you just sit at your desk, and how do you learn it? And when you learn a new score, are you somebody who writes a lot of things in your scores in pencil of many colors, or do you like to keep your scores completely blank?
Yeah, I do have a system. I think it's not a very, how would I say? I have not built the system. It just appeared because that's how I learned. So I use only a pencil of normal color, no colors. I did at some point, but then I realized that I'm reading over only that and not actually the score. so I tried to keep the markings to minimum, but the result is not always not always that. So my scores do look quite digested.
Yeah, it's a good word. Yeah.
and I guess that's what I do. I try to digest and understand the score. Writing things helps me to remember what I was thinking while reading it. And it's not like I'm not trying to just make it easy for me to read the score on the rehearsal, though it often is also that. But also, as you go through the score slowly, a lot of things come up. And then I try to choose which information, which of the ideas which I had, which of them I really want myself to see at the rehearsal. After one read through of the score, my aim is to be able to go and conduct it.
Yes.
So I take quite a lot of time to read one piece from beginning till the end.
Yeah.
But just in case I don't have any more time to study, that read through will have to be sufficient for me to take the score and go and rehearse it. Obviously, if under normal circumstances I do have more time, then I start from the beginning and start making I start from the details into more into bigger arcs and so I start with details actually. And if it's the piece which I know, then it makes it easier, obviously. But if it's any kind of new piece, actually it serves its purpose. So I really pick up every stone and kind of study it.
Well, I think that's what makes this question so fascinating, is that I'm pretty similar to you in that regard. And I start at the beginning and work my way through detail by detail, and then afterwards I might go over and look at the bigger picture and the architecture. Whereas other conductors have come on and said, no, I flick through it straight away, try and get the architecture, and then go in and go in and go in. And so it's almost the complete opposite. And also the same with markings. Some conductors say, I want nothing in my score, and others, like me, I use red, blue, and black. It doesn't matter how you have it, as long as you have a system and it works for you, then good. That's seems to be what's coming out of this question time and time again, is that we're all different people, and we just learn and study and assimilate this music in our own way to make it work so that we can conduct.
Yes, absolutely. It's very personal, and you can't really teach someone to mark the score, but you could teach to study it.
Yes.
And to analyze that you can teach, but the rest is really personal.
Dima, it is time for the 10 questions, and the first 2 come as 1. What sound or noise do you love, and what sound or noise do you hate?
I love the sound of the water, and hate too much music in my head.
There's a lovely line that Simon Rattle once said in an interview where he said growing up he had a constant soundtrack in his head. And it was only much later as a teenager he realised that not everybody else in the world was like that.
Yeah, that's very smart. It's very much as it is, really.
And you know, that soundtrack can be anything from the latest piece you've been studying to, you know, a melody that goes round and round and round in your head like an earworm. But it is always there, isn't it? I've always got something going round and round in my head.
Yeah, it's unavoidable. It's just how it is. But I don't feel good if there's just too much. I need to get out somewhere to wipe my hard disk.
Good phrase. The next question. If you had 24 hours free, what would you spend it doing?
Depending on what I have with me, either going out to the forest, nature, whatever nature, or doing some photography.
Oh, yeah.
Or flying an airplane, or, well, as my new hobby goes, sailing.
Photography. Do you have specific subjects you like to photograph? Are you whilst you're out on your walks, somebody who takes a landscape, or are you into architecture? What sort of things do you like?
No, I would say nothing in specific. I wish I could photograph more people, but it is a little bit problematic. You don't just, walk up to someone and say, "Excuse me, can I take a photo of you?" But having the right equipment, you can photograph people from the distance and without them knowing it. But so far, I haven't found myself really at home there. So I photograph anything which catches my attention and which I start seeing as more than what it is. I want to make a photo of how I see it, not how it looks like.
Who would be a favorite conductor of yesteryear?
That is very, very difficult question.
Well, if you think this one's difficult, wait for the next one.
Okay. So which means that I just have to answer this one. Anyway, there are too many to name. So I would say if I name Nicholas Harnoncourt, this would be as close as it gets. Yeah. But he's not the only one. But he's the first one who comes to my mind. Partly because I'm doing Beethoven this week.
Okay. Yeah.
And so he has been an example of good taste, and example of style knowledge, and example of honesty in music making very often to me. So I have no trouble naming him as the only, but obviously there are so many more.
That's a brilliant answer. So, yeah, if you thought a favourite conductor of yesteryear was a difficult question, let's go for, and who would be a favourite current conductor? Daniel Harding actually said to me that he thought this was a cruel question.
It is a cruel question. Because I don't want to feel, obliged to answer something. I would feel comfortable saying that there is no one, meaning that it's not like I don't like any of living conductors. On the contrary, I like so many of them that I really have no chance of naming one. So the answer will be no, dash.
Well, other people have given a very similar answer, but at least what you've done is quantify it by saying that there are so many. that you like currently, which is, it's true. There are so many great conductors out there. What is the hardest work you have ever conducted?
Yeah, actually, the only way to answer this is to pick up few choices. Technically, I would say Sinfonia of Luciano Berio
Oh,
is pretty tricky. I remember it as one of them. Also, Grand Macabre by Ligeti is very, very tricky. Is and was. So technically, I would say, yeah, perhaps. Okay, let's pick up the third one into this category. It's a mono opera called Neither by Morten Feldman.
Okay.
That's hard stuff on many levels. It's hard stuff psychologically, technically, in terms of rehearsing it, and in terms of holding it together. So yeah, that's technicality. Now on the emotional level, I have to name Tchaikovsky's Six, which I a few years ago stopped performing consciously because I felt that it was a little bit too much to take. Every time I conducted it emptied me completely. Like everything there was and a little bit more. And then I think I had one performance where I felt that, okay, well, I pretty much know how it goes now, so I can, relax a little bit. And after that performance, I decided not to do it anymore for a while, because it's the piece which is supposed to be like, putting salt on the wound and kind of fresh cut. It has to touch you in the most direct way to be able to touch audience. And so that's I feel that is very complicated piece emotionally and psychologically.
Well, I mean,
yeah,
the great thing about this question is that very rarely the answer is ever the same, and what a brilliant answer, especially the Tchaikovsky. I'm going to zone in on the Grand Macabre, by Ligeti. What makes that more staggering is knowing that Barbara Hannigan sings it and conducts it at the same time, which just it's just astonishing, isn't it?
Yes, I don't want to even think about it. But Barbara, I mean, I make myself more, I place a piece in myself by thinking that Barbara is doing many other things which I can never even dream of to do.
Yeah.
So but that's a separate conversation.
When traveling abroad to conduct, what item could you not leave home without?
I don't have anything I just need to have with me, apart from the things which you mentioned.
For the listener, the things that I mentioned are things that are banned and that you're not allowed to say, which is passport, baton, phone, or scores.
Obviously.
Yeah.
And the rest is inside me. So whenever if I need something else, it's in me, or I can find it wherever I am. But there is nothing really I need to take from home apart from what you mentioned.
What is the one thing you would change about being a conductor?
I would change the whole pattern of having a career as a conductor and what it means. Unfortunately, at the moment, having a career as a conductor means that you're not at home. And I find that problematic because being a conductor, you need to face people, and having all your human, spiritual, and emotional parts of your being in balance, and being away from home for so many weeks a year, disbalances you. So I feel that if that can be changed, I would change it. But at the moment, let's see if COVID will arrange things differently in future. But at the moment, you kind of have to make a choice.
Well, I mean, that leads on to an interesting question, which for somebody like you, who has a job in Spain and in Lahti, and I think you told me off the record that you live mainly in Spain. Is that right? Um,
Yeah.
that if you had to spend more time at home, people like yourself with two jobs in two different countries might have to give one up, um, because of COVID and how things have changed. I mean, I've often thought that maybe after COVID, people will be booking conductors to conduct their orchestras from within their own country more because of quarantine reasons. You said you've had to sit in quarantine for 2 weeks in Finland before conducting. What do you think about that going on in the future? Or do you think we'll just return one day fairly soon to what it was like before?
I think complete return to what it was before is not possible. Things will be changed. They are already, they have changed. As you know, for myself, I'm actually starting my last season here in Lahti. This is my 5th season here. So from the next fall, from August 21, Dalia Stasevka is starting here as a chief conductor. So this way, I will be left with an orchestra in Galicia, which is at the same time my home.
Yes.
At the moment. So I don't really know, and especially being in this situation of crisis at the moment, I really don't know what's going to be happening after that. But I take one day at a time.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the way I look at it. Is there's no point in me worrying about my hand of cards at poker until somebody actually deals me the cards. So I'm not going to start.
Very well said.
Yeah, it's not going to start worrying about the future until I know what's coming. Very, very wise answer. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I would be a pilot, and that's I don't even have to think about it. But Dan Harding, he went further than myself. Well, he obviously got himself professional license and actually worked, and if I understand correctly, still works with Air France.
Yes.
And as for myself, I think flying for airline would not be my dream job, but flying professionally, yes, for perhaps something else. Even thinking of flying goods to faraway villages in South America or Africa, things like this. I mean, or let's say flying an ambulance plane anywhere in the world.
So how long have you been flying?
That kind of thing. I've been flying since 2006, so about 14 years.
There seems to be quite a lot of this is the most regular answer, and I think this is now you're about the 4th or 5th. The only person who I wouldn't allow to say pilot was actually Daniel Harding, because he is one, so that's cheating. He had to come up with another profession. But yeah, there are quite a few people who are really into flying, and like you have gone on and taken their private pilot's license and done it. Brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, I would say this has nothing to do with conducting whatsoever, because so many people always, conductors, they always want to fly. I don't know. I think it's a coincidence, and I don't know. Maybe it's an explainable coincidence. I don't know, but me having private pilot license, and my instrument rating, which keeps my flying into in a more kind of demanding way, I'm okay with that. And if I had to do a commercial, I would do it.
Do you think it is the sort of thing that empties the mind of your job and music, and because you have to concentrate so hard on the job of flying, that it's that old thing about using the other half of your brain or a different part of your brain? I know that the things that I like to do in my time off, nothing to do with music, generally tend to use the other bit of my brain. Do you think it's one of those? Having never flown, I don't know.
Yes, I'm sure it is. Your body just needs to balance itself. So I would say, just as you can't think about anything else when you're conducting, then you definitely can't think of anything else when you're flying. And if you do, you are in danger.
Well, that's pretty much the same as conducting as well. Or at least
Yes, exactly. with a little variation, that if you do in your conducting, you are lost.
Yeah, yes, that's true. But and also the fact that the orchestra will fly itself to a point, whereas a plane will probably start crashing quite quickly if you lose your concentration.
Yeah, eventually.
And finally, if the world were to end tonight, what would be your choice of final meal and drink?
Oh my God, you saved the best for last.
Of course, yeah. Well, what it does is it gives a little window into the soul, that find out what people like to eat and drink. We all have to eat and drink, so that's.
I started to think about other things, but there was one thing which came to my mind first, and I'm going to say it now.
Good.
I'd like to eat a portion of thing which is called poronkäristus, and that is reindeer meat prepared in a Lappish way, so from Lapland. And I'd like to eat that at the fire in the forest somewhere in Lapland. And as about drink, I don't know, pretty much anything. I don't care really. It can be red wine, or it can be a shot of vodka or something like this. For sure, not champagne, which I love, but wouldn't suit the case.
No.
And so yeah, something like this. It's not only the meal; it's also where to enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask whether a shot of vodka in a forest setting in Lapland would be a very good thing. And talking of very good things, the whole last hour has been a very good thing. I've loved chatting to you, Dima, and I hope to see you very, very soon.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Michael. Wonderful 1 hour of interesting subjects. Thank you.
A Mic on the Podium was devised and produced by Michael Seal, with music by Ben Dawson. Next time, I chat to the first Australian conductor to appear on the podcast, probably the most famous Australian conductor conducting today. Her career has taken her from her studies and early days working in Australia, and then on to working all across the globe, including being chief conductor and chief executive at the Hamburg State Opera. And soon she will be returning home to start as chief conductor with the Sydney Symphony Orchestra in 2022. Until then, bye-bye.